Please don't send me to Africa. I don't think I've got what it takes. I'm just a man, I'm not a big fan of lions, gorillas, or snakes. I'll serve you here in suburbia in my comfortable middle-class life. But please don't send me to the ends of the earth where the people are restless at night. So I heard that song as a child, a long time ago, and as you can tell, it has stuck with me for many, many years. Now, I don't think I really understood the point of this song when I was a child, because if you hear more than the chorus, it's all about the wrong attitudes that we as evangelical believers often have. And kids, I'm specifically talking to you, but your parents are hearing as well, but it's attitudes that we as kids can have. See, when we think about going to make disciples of all the nations, we're really happy for God to send other people. But often, we're really happy if God lets us stay in our warm little seats at home and just send somebody else. Let me be really, really clear. I am not saying that if you aren't willing to personally, physically go to Africa, you are living in sin. That's not what I'm saying. But kids, often we will give God parameters or fences around what we're willing to do. And we tend to think, well, I've been good enough, Lord. I've done all these things for you, so I deserve this little request to get to stay in my comfort zone, to get to do things that are comfortable to me. We often aren't willing to say to God, like our song just said, "Here am I, send me. Wherever you want me to go, wherever you lead me, here am I, send me." We look at parts of the Bible like Matthew 9 that Mr. Hollingsworth just read for us, and we hear the Lord say, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, send out laborers into your harvest. Just don't send me, or if you do, can you make it like a nice place? Can I have like running water? Or can it not be dangerous? Can I still be safe?" We want the whole world to hear about Jesus, but often we aren't willing to do what it takes personally to be the one to go tell them. Mr. Baker is going to come here in just a minute, and he's going to teach us from Matthew chapter 10. And in those passages, we're going to see that Jesus sends his disciples out, but he doesn't send them out in a comfortable means. Kids, get this picture in your mind. Jesus says, "Do not take any gold or silver or copper with you in your belts." So no money, don't take any money with you. No bag for the journey or an extra shirt or sandals or a staff. So no luggage. Go someplace, but don't take any clothes with you. For a worker is worth his keep. Whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. So go, don't take any money, don't take any clothes or luggage or anything, just the clothes on your back, and don't make any arrangements. Does that sound comfortable to you? Do you want to go on a trip and not have any plans made? Not even necessarily know where you're going? To me, who likes everything to be organized and in control, that sounds terrifying. Like if God told me to do that, I'd be like, hey God, do you know that I don't really like to talk to strangers? And now you want me to not just go to someplace strange, but you want me to like go knock on somebody's door who I don't know and say, "Hey, can I stay with you? And you should feed me and clothe me." That doesn't sound comfortable. When I think about what Jesus is calling us to do, maybe what's not comfortable is talking to a friend at school. Or maybe what's not comfortable is going to knock on that neighbor's door who hasn't been very kind to you. Or maybe what's not comfortable is being willing to talk to a homeless person on the corner who needs Jesus' love. Maybe it is going to another country in some far-off place. But as you hear Jesus say, "Go into all the world and make disciples," are you willing to go to Jerusalem, right here, to all Judea and Samaria, and even to the ends of the earth? Are you willing to take down those fences and those boundaries that you've put up to say, "God, this is where I'm willing to go"? And are you willing to say, "Wherever you lead me, I'll go"? Maybe we could change the song to something like this. "Please, Lord, save those in Africa. I'm sure that you have what it takes. You died for all to save from the fall. And I know that it's not a mistake that you've asked me to go and on them bestow the grace of the gospel of life. Please remind me that you will be there too in case I am scared in the night."
Rachel nailed the sermon right there. I'm honored to preach this Sunday's morning service at World Gospel. I'm an elder serving in my 4th year with a focus on global outreach. I chair the Global Outreach Committee. Before I get into a rather quick journey through a lot of people that are disciples, that are learners, that are followers of Jesus, I want to do a shout out for Jim Snap and Linda LaCour Snap, who are in Houston. And they asked me to thank you, World Gospel, for your prayers, your emails, your cards, your variety of ways to encourage them. Linda's dealing with a very serious illness, and it's really encouraging them to know that World Gospel, throughout the week, in different situations, are praying for them. All right, here we go. See if I get this right. I'm going to have a lot of these slides up here, so hopefully you can see them. Dr. Dennis McDowell has passed now, but he was my college professor in chemistry. He was my mentor, my friend, and my advisor with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. He was from Ireland, Northern Ireland, graduated from the University of Belfast. He went to MIT for his graduate work and postgraduate work, and he came when he had a young family of 4 children in his early 30s to West Virginia University. Quickly, he was acclaimed as the most brilliant professor on the campus. His brilliance also extended into the Bible and into being a follower of Jesus. He had a Bible study in his home on Sunday afternoons at 3 o'clock. That's where I got to meet him. And after a while, he said, "I would like to try to get InterVarsity Christian Fellowship on the West Virginia University campus." And he asked me to go talk to the dean of students and see how we would do that. The dean said, "Advertise a meeting. Make it interesting. See how many people are interested in InterVarsity Christian Fellowship." So I went back to Dr. McDowell. How do I make it interesting? He said, "Show the film Red River of Life from Moody Science and be prepared to answer questions about it. And I'm going to," and I grabbed a few others from the Bible study and said, "Come with me." And then he taught us about InterVarsity, what it is. We had the meeting. There was a significant turnout. So I was prepared to answer questions on the movie or on InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. Here was the first question. No one had ever asked me that. How do you deal with that question? So I had the student repeat it. And my first response was, well, you're right. Jesus would not punish innocent people. And then a thought came to me, but what about Psalms 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God? That was put in there by the Lord. There is a promise. Matthew 10:19. This is lesson 1. I have 14 more. When they deliver you over, do not be anxious how you are to speak. I'm going to lower this a little bit. Do not be anxious how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. And after the meeting, and we had a good turnout, it began a process where West Virginia University recognized InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and it's still a very healthy organization today. And I went to Dr. McDowell's house, and I shared with him this lesson from Matthew 10:19, and about Romans 3:23 coming into my mind, my words. He asked me, he said, well, for the next week, study Romans 1, 2, and 3, and we'll get together in a week. I did, came back, I shared that people are not punished for not believing in Jesus whom they have not heard, but no one is innocent. All have sinned. So we're punished because of our rejection of God. And he said, read those passages again, come back in another week. I came back. And I was different this time because as I was studying those passages, it got to just not my head, but my heart. And I started to feel some compassion toward those in my family, those on the campus, my friends that had rejected God. And this was really a sad verse. And for some of those folks, it made me cry. In our world today, according to the Joshua Project, we have 3.22 billion people in our world that have never heard the gospel of Jesus. That's amazing with all the technology. 3.22 billion people that have not heard the gospel. And that's people groups, mostly, that really keep the gospel out, or no one's ever gone in. In the United States, we have 125 million people. Most of them have not heard the gospel. Some may have heard it, but they consider themselves post-Christian and have no interest in it. How could this be in the United States? Well, most of those are Buddhism groups, Muslim groups, Islam, Hindu, that really protect themselves from things like the gospel of Jesus Christ. Here's the Great Commission that Rachel was talking about. All believers are needed in World Gospel Church because all believers are disciples, and this commitment to go to all nations and present the gospel of Jesus Christ can best be served if everyone that's a believer in World Gospel Church takes all of their gifts, all of their fruits, and supports this. Some go, some stay, but encourage. There's a variety of ways. But it's not just the few that go. It takes all of us to really make this a big deal. And it historically has been a big deal at World Gospel Church. Matthew 9 and 10 are filled with lessons. We're going to look at 14 lessons. We're going to look at 14 people. Some you may know, some you do not know. These are disciples that illustrate the lesson. And then I challenge you to make it personal, because these are lessons from Jesus to you as a disciple. Some of the individuals, I cannot show you their picture. I cannot give their names or where they are, because it could cause them not to be allowed back into a country, to be kicked out of a country, or to be put on a kill list. Because in most Muslim countries, some more serious than others, if they find out that you are, quote, a missionary, and that's why we use global worker, because we could greatly harm some of our global workers if we called them missionaries. Because if they're recognized as advancing the gospel of Jesus Christ, harm could come to them. So here we go. Okay, the first individual, his name is Ted Fletcher, and I suspect most of you do not know Ted Fletcher. Billy Graham came to Korea when he was in the service and presented the gospel and said to surrender to Jesus Christ. And Ted said, I'm a soldier. Don't use that word, surrender. But he did. He surrendered to Jesus Christ, and he recognized that faith makes things happen. In his life, it's an illustration of that. Psalm 2:8, he claimed. Let me read it. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. A young Christian read that verse and claimed it. This is God's promise to me. I'm going to go into all the nations and make disciples. So I came home. And for 25 years, he could not, that just wasn't happening. But he and his wife, Peggy, claimed it. That's going to be ours. He had a talent for selling. He actually became the national sales manager for Wall Street Journal. But he resigned because this promise. He would go to every mission organization that he could find. Send me, please. And they said, you don't have enough education. So he was rejected every single time. And his church had a mission trip to Nigeria in 1979. He went over there on a short-term mission, came back and said, God, we're going to make this happen. So he and Peggy in their basement started an agency, and he went out to recruit global workers. 1982, he had 19 and sent those to 4 nations. Today, his organization is one of the largest in the world, called Pioneers. And they mostly go to Muslim countries. Today, they have 3,300 global workers in 100 countries. So faith makes things happen. As he looked back over those 25 years, he said, my faith kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Never did I doubt that this was going to happen. I claimed this promise from Psalm 2:8. Ted Fletcher. Some of you know Joanne or Carrie Jo Kane. Some of you know her. Here's the promise, or here's the lesson. Go to the diseased, dying, despised, dirty, and dangerous, where the need is the greatest. And that seems to be in conflict with what our self says. I want to go where there's peace and security. I do not want to go there. In 2014, World Hope International said, Carrie Jo, we want you to come to Sierra Leone to be our global worker nurse. Bring your family. Her husband Jeff and daughter Rebecca were preparing to go. In 2014, Sierra Leone became the crisis center for Ebola. Let me tell you about Ebola. You probably know a lot, but the mortality rate for an adult that had contact with Ebola was 50%. If you got Ebola, your chances of surviving were 50%. If you were a young person, chances of survival were lower, down to the 30, 20%. Ebola was a bad, bad deal. And here, Carrie Jo was invited to go to Sierra Leone. Her parents were missionaries, so she had been there for several years, but she came to the United States for education. She told her husband and daughter, stay here. I'm going to Sierra Leone. She went there and immediately went to the Bombao district, which includes Palawala, the village that we have a partnership with. And she started putting buckets of water and chlorine. She was training healthcare workers how to recognize the symptoms of Ebola, how to deal with them. There was no emergency vehicle transportation. She set that up. And in about 9 months, the end of 2015, they defeated that pandemic of Ebola. And nationally, she's recognized as the reason for that. Because, look where she went. She went where she didn't really want to go, but she went because she felt that the Lord was having her go there. Well, I can't give you the name of the next one or where they are, but the lesson is seek mercy, not sacrifice. This is a couple that we support. We have supported them since 2005. Actually, it's a family. And they were in this Muslim country, and somehow word got out that they were Christians and they were advancing God's kingdom. And so they had to escape. And it was a very dangerous escape. In fact, their friend, who was a missionary at that time, was killed because he was also on the kill list. So they got out. They went to another country that was safer. But he still had a passion for the country where he was located. And he worked with the believers there and was fully exercised. He came here for a visit. And I asked him, I said, what sacrifice you're making to help that country that kicked you out? And actually, if you would go back, they would kill you. And he corrected me. He said, it's not sacrifice. I'm not sacrificing anything. God has put love in my heart, mercy in my heart for this nation. That's another lesson. Do things that, not because you have to sacrifice, but because the Lord has put a love in your heart to do them. Here's a lesson. Look forward to new cloths and wineskins, new opportunities found in Matthew 9:17. Some of these lessons are back from Matthew 9. Dick and Terry Grady. They've been here. He's been a keynote speaker at our Go conference a few years back. He's been a vice president of One Challenge International and was preparing to retire. He had reached that age when the Lord called upon him and said, there's new opportunities. Be open to them. And this new opportunity is an amazing opportunity. It's the Global Church Planting Network. We'd like for you to be a leader. It's a network of indigenous workers, and they've looked over the entire world and they find pockets where there are no churches. And they take the attitude of Barnabas and they encourage the development of those churches. They serve those individuals. They train them. So across this whole world, there's 18 regions and sub-regions that they're directing now. An amazing opportunity. And they really know, because they have looked at the world, that God's changing things in missions. It used to be a church plant was to build a church and they will come. But the buildings have diminished in value in terms of advancing God's kingdom. Some countries have totally wiped out all churches but God is advancing his kingdom in ways that they've never seen. What they're saying about these new cloths, if you take a new cloth, put it with old cloth, it'll rip. If you take new wine, put it in an old wineskin, it'll explode. God is providing new opportunities, new cloths, new wineskins. It's a different world out there than it has been. And the key is relationships. They're building relationships. You can't go into a place where there's no church and ignore the problems that are there. When we went to Pelawala, the very first thing we did, day one when we arrived, was to get a well built. They needed water. Every day they needed fresh water, and they had none. So he says you build relationships, and that's true. The Barna Group says if you're going to get people to come to World Gospel, you can advertise on TV, in the paper, billboards, but the most effective, by far, way to get people to come to World Gospel is through relationships. Our new pastor is going to be asking us about our relationships in sharing our faith. And he would expect and will expect each of us to be praying for someone, to meet maybe many people, to have relationships, to bring them to hear the gospel. So relationships across the world and at World Gospel are really key to advancing the kingdom of God. We've been supporting them since 1986. Here's another couple that I cannot tell you where they are, but they were here 2 weeks ago. They were here 2 weeks ago visiting us. Last summer, they came to the United States and went back to the Northern Africa Muslim country where they were serving, had a very effective ministry going, and they wouldn't let them come back in. That's where their house was, all their belongings. They said, no, you can't come back. Never can you come back. What a horrible experience. A friend down in Lebanon called them and said, come and minister with us. And so they went down, and the Lebanese looked at him and said, you're a refugee like we are. And it gave them a great ministry. And they told us 2 weeks ago, they said, that was a horrible experience. We don't want anyone to go through that, but it's been a blessing. And so if you read those passages in Matthew 9, 1 through 8, you see a horrible experience became a blessing. So if you're in a horrible experience and God has put you there, expect it to turn into a blessing if you'll let him. Many of you know Janine, but you may not know, she at the age of 12, and I was thinking of her when Rachel was talking, at the age of 12, she was shy. She couldn't talk to anyone. And she prayed about it at the age of 12. Give me power, give me strength. She grew up in Colombia. Her parents were missionaries. But she went away to be educated, went to Asbury. And as a young girl, she was invited back to teach Hebrew at a seminary in Colombia. And she was there teaching that. She met a friend, a lady became a friend, said, I have a relative in prison. This is Bella Vista prison. 1 to 2 people are killed every day. It's called Hell on Earth. And I would like you to come and share with a group of prisoners. Well, to her, as a sheep in the midst of wolves, she went. And she shared about Jesus. And in this group, 23 prisoners followed Jesus. And so she went back to the seminary and was teaching. They invited her back. She went into this prison, and there was a prisoner in the depths of the prison that the guards wouldn't even go and be with him because it was that dangerous. He wanted to talk to her. And so she went with another prisoner back, and he was the worst of the worst. And she shared with him, and he became a follower of Jesus. And that's been the story of her life. Now, if you look at Bella Vista prison today, there's been 1 murder in the last 10 years. And during the pandemic, this is amazing. No one from the outside can go in and hold Bible studies or share at chapel. The prisoners are all doing it. They even have a seminary in the prison. And so it's been an amazing thing happening there. But think about it. If she would have heard, she knew what that prison was like. If she would have not gone, look what would have perhaps not happened. We've been supporting Janine through OMS since 1990. This couple has been here many times, and we've supported them since 1984. They were getting ready to retire. They had a wonderful, by the way, they say you don't really retire from making disciples. Dr. McDowell, he taught chemistry up until he was 93 years old. May of that year, he decided to not teach anymore, and he died 2 months later. But he was a chemistry professor at West Virginia University until he was 93 years old, and he was continuing to hold those Sunday afternoon Bible studies. And he said, you never retire. Anyway, this couple, can't tell you where they are, but they were in Latin America, and they had a very successful ministry. And, excuse me. The Lord, look at the lesson, getting us ready to be in taken places where no one else can go. And where were those places? You're getting ready to retire. I want you to go to the Middle East. I want you to do what you're doing in Latin America to impact all of the Middle East. So they went, and they're an amazing couple doing amazing things. So be careful when you tell the Lord you're going to retire. This guy, his name's Dick Hillis. You may have heard of him. At one point in time, he was the most sought-after speaker in the Christian world, and he came here several times. He came as keynote speaker on several of our Go conferences. At the age of 20, he went to China as a missionary. Back then, that was an acceptable term. Look at the lesson. Wise as serpents and innocent as doves. 2 years into it, here's what his description of himself as a missionary in China. My spirit had withered and dried up. Praying became a whirl of thought that swept through my mind but never left my lips. I read the Bible as one would read a popular magazine. I preached with no inspiration. Confusion and guilt played havoc with my emotions. I was ready to declare my failure and concede defeat. Then I got a telegram. He viewed discouragement, loneliness, defeat as a sin. And this telegram was a 10-day seminar for discouraged missionaries. It took him 3 bike days, 2 train rides to get there, and then 5 days to come back. But he let go and let God, and he could then be wise as serpents because he focused on being innocent as a dove, and he was convinced that innocence was the important base in which to be wise as serpents. And he had tremendous ministry in China. He came back to the United States, and he founded Over One Challenge International. We have 4 supported global workers in that ministry. Joanne Corey, an amazing lady. Karen and I met her in an airport. That was she's 80 years old and just moving all over the world. She is considered one of the top 50 Christian leaders today. She founded World Hope International. She founded the village partnership that we have with Pelawala. Look at the lesson. Wise in picking battles. You may have heard in 2018, Willow Creek Church in South Barrington, Illinois, was having a terrible problem with morality. The attendance was 26,000. In 1 year, it was dropped down to 6,000. She was asked to co-lead a group of 4 outsiders to come in and find out what happened. Well, here's what happened. In summary, you view this quick river with lost souls. Willow Creek was using all technology, all flash and dash and everything to pull people out of this river to save souls. But there was no battle going on to protect their innocence. So people were falling into this river. Leaders, elders, pastors. Their battle was to save souls and to build that attendance. Joanne Corey established a way of accountability, structure. Key one was pastor reports to the elder, and they're on their way back. Stanley Tam, he's been here many times. He's still alive. He loves World Gospel Church. He became a Christian on a missionary trip. He went with a global worker to Korea. And the global worker had to come back and said, you finished out the 2 weeks. All he could do was give his testimony. And he saw people come to Jesus, come to Jesus. So here was a very successful businessman. If you drive I-75 in Lima, Ohio, you see this huge manufacturing facility. In lights it says, Christ is the answer. And you would think everything was going well for him. But he said this verse, whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And how did he find his life? He gave his business to God. And he went to the attorneys and they said, we don't know how to do that. But they figured it out. Today, 1/4 of the budget of OMS comes from the profits of U.S. Plastics Corporation, feeding into their OMS is the majority owner of U.S. Plastics Corporation. And guess who manages that and visits with Stanley Tam? Our Mike Dragon does. I had coffee with a fellow from Terre Haute. You all may know him, Bob Brown. And he was sharing with me what happened with Camp Navigate here at World Gospel Church. And he shared some emails that he got. You know, 50% of those young people, over 50%, have no church home that were here this summer. And we opened it up for Camp Navigate. And it's not a noted Christian endeavor, but the gospel is a part of everything that goes on. As he was sharing that, he started crying. The lesson, compassion and emotion about people without a shepherd. Remember in Matthew 9, Jesus wept and had compassion. Dr. McDowell said, as you read Romans chapter 3, verse 23, you should weep. So I share that because it was great to see this businessman, former CEO and president of Tri-Automation in this country, or in Terre Haute, that has a compassion. He's also working with us on Sports World. And if you talked to me last year after a week with Sports World in the public schools, I couldn't talk for about 2 weeks without crying because over 80% of the students in our public schools have no church home. And here was an opportunity. And many of them came. They wanted to hear the gospel. Many of them were prayed for the very first time in their life. And I just couldn't talk about that without crying. Rahab came, Silas did 2 weeks ago at our mini conference. Fear not, for we are valued. Truth will be known. They're very unique because they're indigenous global worker for Kenya. The Kenyans don't understand that. They came here and they were highly educated in both Kenya and the United States. And Kenya said, wow, if you have that much education, stay in the United States. They are going back, and they are back as global workers to Kenya and surrounding nations. They know the culture, they know the languages, but they can't get people. We don't know in the United States, gee, who are they? I think they're the future. Indigenous workers, as I told you, the Grady's, this network, it's indigenous workers planting God's church, not necessarily buildings, but planting a witness in areas where there are none. Here's a couple we support and have since 2005. Go where we do not want to go and do what we would rather not do, even when there is a choice. This couple had a very successful ministry in a Muslim country, and they were kicked out. Somehow, people found out that they were Christians. And they've been wandering around for a few years without a country. Finally, they are in another Muslim country. And during the pandemic, a wonderful ministry has opened up to serving refugees. But God sent them. They didn't really want to go, but they went. And they're in this Muslim country that is filled with refugees, and they have a tremendous ministry. He was to be our speaker this year at the Go Conference. Matthew Sleet. He became a Christian chief surgeon at a big health system in New Jersey. He went out in the reception area, saw this gold Bible. It was from the Gideons, and he started reading it. And he became a follower of Jesus. He shared it with his wife and his 2 children, and they became followers of Jesus. One of the first things they did was to purge anything in their lives that was stopping them from being fruitful. And Matthew says, during this pandemic, God is purging individuals. He's purging the earth. The Chesapeake Bay has never been clearer than it is now because there's been less traffic. But individuals, he said, it's a time to think about what's in your life that's not bearing fruit. Purge it. By the way, he wants to still come and speak to us sometime. We'll figure it out. So we have no Go Conference, but the Go Committee is wanting to emphasize relationships with our global workers. First thing, we have a wonderful document, and if you're not on the distribution list, you should. I call it the Prayer Connection. Every week, we update prayer requests. We get requests even this morning. So some of the requests, it's published, Betsy puts it out every Saturday. And we have to add things because we find out about them this morning. It's very rare for a global worker somewhere in this world to be able to look to a group of people, World Gospel Church, and recognize they will pray. They're committed to praying. They get together every week and pray. They put our names and our needs on this list. So if you don't get that document, see me, see any member of the Global Go Committee, and we'll get that for you. You got to see from everything I shared, World Gospel is a big deal in the world. It has been historically, and it is today. Perhaps today more so than ever, because of the support we give them by prayer and by finance. We're going to introduce in October, and we hope every one of our global workers can be adopted by an individual, by a family. It can be intimidating to look at 28 global worker teams and say, how do I get to know them? How do you even start? Adopt one and interact with them by mail, by email, by messages. And the global workers that you select will be very anxious to interact with you because you're from World Gospel Church. And as I say, it's a big deal. Some of the global workers like Zach and Christy Yoder are saying, hey, we'd like to talk with you. We sent out an email from the church saying that they're available to talk this coming Monday at 10 a.m. by Zoom, Tuesday at 7 p.m., and even Thursday the 27th of August at 5 and 8 p.m. So if you'd like to get to know a global worker, we're going to have more and more opportunities to interact with them, to see them and hear them personally. More and more of our global workers are sending us videos that we will show. We have this 24-hour prayer time for the verdicts and World Gospel Church in this transition. You heard Thursday is the last day to sign up. And it goes from 6 a.m. on this Friday, this coming Friday, to 5 a.m. on the 22nd of August. As I mentioned, we have 28 global workers. 7 of them have been sent from this body. At times, we've had 9 or 10. I have one final thing. On Pelawala, this is amazing. Child sponsorship. You know, this thing that Joanne Lyons set up, we got 3 churches to partner, and Faith Wesleyan, First Baptist North, and World Gospel. And you go over there and you fall in love with the kids. We have right now, I think it's 137. Well, we have 86 for sure, and First Baptist said we want 24 of these sponsorships. Faith Wesleyan said we want 24. This just happened this week. And so all we have left are 3 more children in Pelawala that need a sponsorship. So if you're interested, I have them. And we'd love to get you engaged with these. My young girl is 13 years old. She knows every course, every Christian course that's ever been written. and she loves to sing it. Let's close in prayer. Father, give us your heart and compassion for the lost, a heart for the nations, a renewed love of the gospel, and a deep admiration and concern for the global workers we have with our church. Provide them, encourage them, prosper them, and embolden their hearts. Raise up and equip more disciples for your harvest fields. Fill them with your Spirit, deliver them from the evil one, empower them to boldly proclaim and represent you and your word to the world until you return. Help all of us to be obedient to your voice and do our part in advancing your kingdom on earth. In your name, amen.